We'll start now, Amrita.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Crossroads of Conversations is a forum initiated by RV College of Architecture to involve alumni across the globe with current college scenarios and to be a part of various discussions and exchanges of ideas. The past 2 years have been challenging, and the emergence of collaborative practice seems to be the way forward. The need of the hour is to diversify and combine strategies from a spectrum of other disciplines related to the field of architecture. As a step in this direction, we're proposing to organize webinars for the ongoing semester, exploring the relevance of other disciplines on architectural design, titled Crossroads of ConveRVsations 2021. The webinars will enable the exchange of ideas and work experience from other allied fields between the domain experts and alumni of RVCA who are currently spread across the globe. The underlying theme this year for the talks is Facets, Architecture and the Allied Disciplines. The intent to view and integrate different perspectives as facets of architecture and design thinking. Each event will be for a duration of 2 hours and in the form of presentation by 3 speakers, followed by interactions with the audience. The topic for today's event is Designing Fabric in Architecture. We're joined by Kshitija, Mruthyunjaya, Shreya, Lohia, and Alana Kandula. This discussion will be moderated by architect and RV alumnus Divya Devatha. The question and answer session will be held at the end. Now, a little more about our moderator. Divya has been nurturing her passion for design from a young age. She spent her childhood drawing from observations, creating imaginative characters, and even doing art projects at old age homes. Divya was especially interested in making collages, since it was a form that challenged her to use limited materials in a creative way. Her penchant for finding imaginative solutions to practical restrictions eventually developed into a career in architecture. Armed with a diploma from Columbia University and a bachelor's from RVSA Bangalore, Divya worked with CNT architects, KYNKYNY, Home, and Khosla Associates before collaborating with Rajan Sharma to found Draw Studio. When she's not working, Divya enjoys crochet, ceramics, and discovering quirky new business in her locality. She's an avid traveler and has also recently developed an interest in cooking. Thank you, ma'am, for coming here today.
Hi, everyone.
Our speaker, first speaker is
Divya. Also, you can call me Divya. Please don't say that. We're not that old.
Our first speaker is Kshitija Mruthyunjaya. Kshitija is an architect and designer. After completing her bachelor's from India, she moved to the UK, where she pursued an MA in architectural regeneration and development, and then an MArch. She worked for a leading firm in Bath, UK for several years before moving to Milan to pursue her master's in design. To further understanding of how material and social are entangled together, she collaborated with Registry of Sarees for her final MA design in 2019 and is currently the creative director at the organization. Her main goal is to use her skill and knowledge in design as a regenerative action to create a conscious and inclusive community. Now over to you, ma'am. Thank you for being here.
Having me, and don't call me ma'am either. You can call me by my name.
Kshitija, we're not really able to hear you very clearly. Could you increase the volume?
It's actually full. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little better. Maybe you could just. Are you using headphones? Okay, no.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's a little low still. Is it just me or anyone here who could help us?
Yeah, it's not very audible. I think it's a little low.
It's a little low.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we have finished the introduction, then I would like to welcome the speakers.
Yes, sorry, sir. Please. I'd like to invite you to.
Yeah, so on this forum of what the topic, drawing threads, intervening stories from architecture and fabric, I think I welcome Kshitija, Shreya, Aalana for giving their time and also I think, yeah, sharing their experiences and taking us on a journey, and also Divya, Devatha for agreeing to be a moderator for this event. I think let us go forward and hear what interesting things they have to say, and also join them on the journey.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome to all of them, and bringing them on board onto the RVCA Alumni Forum. I think we have been trying to strengthen this forum with backward integration, and we see a lot of value in it, and we have already been seeing that happening. So going forward, we would like to have more and more such talks, and I thank all of them to have joined this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. I think Kshitija, you can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the screen visible?
Yes.
And am I audible? Is it better now?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
it's better now.
Much better.
So today I'm going to present my first collaboration, what Namrata spoke about with the Registry of Sarees. And this started in 2019. But before I go ahead, I just want to introduce the organization to people who don't know about it. Registry of Sarees is a research and study center based in Bangalore, in Domlu. And we are a multidisciplinary organization when we enable design, curatorial, and publishing projects in the area of handspun and handwoven textiles. So we create documentation of textiles, and we have a library and a studio space as well. And we also curate exhibitions and learning events that educate through viewers' craft, person's particular skill or trade. The first exhibition conducted by the Registry of Sarees is called The Meanings Metaphor. And this was kind of based on, this was the exhibition of, so we are custodians of two major collections, basically. One is the Khadi, the Fabric of Freedom, which this was the exhibition of that. And the second collection is sarees, textiles from all over India. And that exhibition, like we're kind of, it's ongoing now. We're in the process of exhibiting it. Hopefully next year that'll come through. So this one was called The Meanings Metaphor. And the original exhibition was curated by Mr. Martin Singh in support of the Wolcott Foundation to honor the past. And there were 3 exhibitions held between 2018 and 2019. And we worked with curator Mayank Mansingh Kaul. And the 3 exhibitions were held at, the first one was at Chirala. And the objective here mainly was to kind of understand and enable further hand spinning and handloom weaving in different parts of the country today. And in Coimbatore, 108 pieces of textiles were presented at Lakshmi Mills. Again, here it was to showcase the relevance of short staple indigenous cotton that is present in India. And it was examined in the light of hand spinning and hand weaving again. And the third exhibition was at Bangalore, where 54 pieces were exhibited. And this responded to the sustainable and environmental and social issues surrounding the design aspect of the collection.
Mm-hmm.
So last year, what we have done is we have started a commercial entity called Yali. And this is basically taking from the Meanings Metaphor exhibition. And whatever the research and documentation that happens at the Registry of Sarees and the products that come out of it are sold on this commercial entity, basically. So we have 5 projects now. The first one is Hosa Aramba, which was the result of the research I conducted with the Registry of Sarees in 2019. The second project is brown cotton. The third is Venkatgiri, and the fourth is hand spun cotton from Ponduru in Andhra Pradesh, and the fifth one is cotton from Kandula. I will just,
Thanks.
sorry if somebody can
I think participants have to mute their audio.
please. So I'll just get more in detail to the Hosaramba project. So the second project, Kandu fabric or brown cotton, is a naturally colored cotton, and it's an indigenous variety. So we collaborated with Udanta Trust and the Dharwad University, and we got the fabric and we've created a ready-to-wear collection. And Venkatgiri, we collaborated with the handloom pioneer Malvika Singh, who's the founder of Seminar magazine. And here we go back and the designs kind of are taken from her memory and her imagination. And there are 9 designs there. Again, going back to what fine cotton, and what it meant, what Venkatgiri was like back then. Uh, then handspun cotton from Ponduru and Bengal is we collaborate with Rakesh Thakur, who is again a part of the. So getting more in detail of like why I collaborated with the Registry of Sarees during my research was that, I mean, I've studied architecture. I've been in academics for about 12 years now. And I wanted to apply my knowledge in architecture. What's happening?
I'm sorry, I'm just checking, but I don't know who's doing this. Kshitija, if you could continue.
Yeah, I'll just continue talking. So yeah, I wanted to apply my knowledge and skills in architecture on kind of how to understand how material, social, environment, and technology merge together. What are the current needs, and how I can connect the past and the past, present, and the future, basically. So I'm more interested in a context-based intervention, and this project kind of came about to the Registry of Sarees via Shreya's Trust. They are a non-profit organization based in Bangalore. They were already working with the community in Kodiala, which is which is a small village in Mandya. There are about 3,700 odd people, and it, based on oral and historic evidences, it was learned that the community in Kodiala are basically Padmashali weavers, who are originally cotton weavers from Andhra Pradesh. And they're highly skilled weaving community from Andhra, who've said to have migrated during the Tipu Sultan era. While the community have been primarily kind of weaving, was weaving cotton before, over the last like 60 odd years, what's happened is cotton weaving is almost non-existent. And there's been high demand for silk and synthetic products. So everything, the kind of system now is designed or like has changed in such a way as to cater to the demands of the mass market, basically. So out of like 400 families in the village, only about 1% currently practice handloom. And so the aim of my study was to develop a holistic framework to reintroduce handloom production based on self-reliant practices. And because I come from an architecture background, and I wanted to understand first the handloom production and consumption. And then I wanted to understand the current mode of production and consumption in Kodiala. And then I analyzed how the previous, how can we adopt a self-reliant practice based on the previous understanding. And then the proposal was made to introduce a new identity to the products and also to the space as well. So before, there was primary and secondary research that was undertaken, firstly to understand production organization, as I said, in terms of scale, like what are the different types of production patterns that have existed and what is existing now, and spatially like how it works. Where do they work? Do they work in a household environment? Do they work in a factory, a workshop? All of that understanding was needed. And based on that, I drew 6 parameters. So there were artisans. Who are the artisans? Obviously, we have to understand that. It starts with that. Then what materials, tools, and skills they use. What is the social relationship they've had, and then how has it changed now? What are the objects they produce? What is the distribution pattern? And then finally, the consumption pattern. And this was applied like chronological. I did a chronological study from the Vijayanagar Empire to like post-independence, both in a tabular form and also as illustrations. So for the illustrations to come through, I created this library of kind of, based on these parameters, I created a library of like who the artisans are, like what is the different technology, the materials, etc. And again, going back to all the way back to Vijayanagar Empire, this tabular form will kind of tell you who the artisans were then, what sort of material they used. The technology back then was a draw loom, for instance. How was the skill passed on? Was it generation to generation, master to apprentice? What were the social relationships then that kind of enhanced and fed into the system? What sort of objects they produced, who were their consumers, and how did they distribute their products. So essentially I did like a mapping exercise sorts to kind of see like how they produce, like where the cotton came, then the full process of, then the post process of cotton, spatially like how they all worked together, where the living space and the loom space was like almost like, integrated closely. Then who were their consumers, main consumers, and what are their selling points, etc. So, the study kind of went from all the way to the post-colonial thing. And then, I realized that there are changes in the system so far. And now essentially we are in a system which is disconnected, and there's a disconnection not just between the weaver and the wearer. There's disconnection between fiber and cloth, and entirely in all of the processes, and they're suited to mass production and consumption patterns, which is rooted in speed, which was not, that wasn't the case before. And Kodiala again is it's in a similar situation, and it's undergone like several changes in terms of economy, socially, like the political changes, and it's just led to disappearance of the handloom practice in the area. And here the picture you see on the right is Shridhar. He's a weaver who's been working with us since the start of this project. So just to give you an idea, his story is that, his story is kind of is the story of many other weavers in the village. He was a handloom weaver once with 12 looms, and he was forced to like move into like a power loom factory because the silk prices were fluctuating rapidly like 15 years ago. And he says, that his wife had to move back to the answer to Bangalore, and he continued to live in Kodiala. Then he had to move to a factory. He had to work in a factory space because Paolo, that's how it is. Whereas before he had a space where his mom and his wife would work together to create textiles. And he's been like severely kind of impacted by the changes. And he says, like, when you ask him like what do you think, like his main aspiration was to move back to handloom, and he says that losing the advantages of weaving handloom was just it hit them quite bad. And he says, like, now we have to rely on electricity in power loom factories, and our entire family, it kept us together before, whereas now we have to travel long distance for work. The investment was minimal back then. Health and safety wise also, it was like a lot more positive. So there were a lot of weavers who aspired to move back to handloom. So and also in terms of the product, here you see these are the kind of products that are woven now, where if you go to Kodiala, there's nothing like a Kodiala sari per se, whether it's in terms of design, the motif, the construction. It's all borrowed from other clusters. Whereas here in Ponduru, for instance, in Andhra Pradesh, they are also Padmashali weavers. They here the weavers know where the cotton is grown, and all of the hand processes are intact. This is probably one of the only clusters in India that's maintained the kind of the integrated system where the ginning process, the spinning process, everything happens by hand, and the community is integrated. They know exactly who the consumers are. So that kind of the close-knit, the connected system still exists. So this was a main inspiration for the project, actually. So it was so the material, in terms of material, the setup and the space would kind of follow, like, go from weaving silk, art silk in polyester to a cotton. And in phase one, also cotton is, you can't just move to hand spun cotton because the weavers are not used to weaving it. We had to first move to mill spun yarn, and then now we are slowly going to move to hand spun yarn. And in terms of technology, move from a power loom to hand loom. And in terms of skills, from forced to a more open-ended skill development. And in phase one, they would gain skills in cotton weaving, and then they would gain skills in hand spun weaving and natural dyeing. And in terms of social relationships, we would start with a handloom workshop and slowly move them to, like, the independent handloom household. So essentially it would move them from being isolated to connected to their families and to other stakeholders. Then objects, we would move from powerloom products to handloom cotton saris first and scarves, and then to hand spun fabrics. Distribution, exploitative middleman distribution system to a more transparent one. And in terms of consumption, from a conspicuous one to a more conscious one. So this project was set up in a very collaborative manner, where communication kind of played a major role. We all spoke different languages. We all came from different disciplines. So building trust among the community is a slow process, and also amongst the stakeholders. After an initial, like, few meetings with the stakeholders and the weaving community, it was established that we have various skills and experiences to share via this project. So, but there are also, like, technical challenges in terms of, say, like the loom setup, for instance. So for me, it was about understanding the different parts of the loom, and spatially as well. Like, we moved in, this was kind of like the image that you see on the left. That was the workshop, and the height wasn't enough for the dobby and the jacquard to fit in. So how do we address all of this? So a design intervention, spatial intervention, was also kind of undertaken as a part of this project. Surface by surface, I kind of inspected what changes needed to be made. While the floor was intact, the roof needed to be changed. Then the walls needed alterations, and the windows needed replacement. In terms of light, while there was ample natural light, artificial light was not enough, because weavers kind of work start early in the morning and work kind of late into the evening sometimes. Ventilation, again, there were no fans, ceiling fans in the summer, so they would be very, very hot. Then storage system, again, very important. They needed like ample storage system for their own items and also for the yarn and other items like weaving related items. And most importantly, facilities like toilet and bath. And another thing that was noticed was like the seat of the loom. They complained that a lot of them have backaches, and women kind of found it hard to move in and out because there was no kind of opening. So they had to lift their legs up and get into the seat and then take their legs off. So that was kind of not great. So this was the proposal finally. So you enter and then you have a pre-loom space here where they do spinning, winding, etc., and enough space for 6 looms to be comfortably kind of spaced out. And on the sides, you have ample storage and then resting areas for the weavers. This is essentially how it was. And another aspect was that, they were complaining that some of them have to walk long distances from the weaving unit back home. So we were like, okay, how do we resolve that problem? So an integrated facility was proposed. So if this is an existing weaving unit, phase by phase, we would add things that would facilitate or like, add to the, what do you say, mm, which would become advantages for the weavers basically. So first thing was the toilet facilities and landscape area, so they can grow their own fiber for weaving, which they can spin into yarn. So things like sisal, and there's a whole range of flora and fauna that they can grow and use for dyeing and also for fibers. And then a little shop maybe, so then they could earn an income from which they could build their own housing units. So then they don't have to move long distances. So, and in terms of material and technology, I kind of spoke to the weavers' families, and I found that Shridhar's brother-in-law has been in construction for a long time. And he told me how, like, little things have changed where before they used to use natural plaster, now they use cement, or they used to use also sisal grows like widely in and around Kodiala, and that is used for textiles. And he told me that it's kind of strong enough to be woven into mats. And and then we were like, okay, so if it can be woven into mats, can we just do like a biocomposite structure which could be pressed into sheets and use it as roofing? While these experiments haven't been conducted practically, but these were like the proposals that we made. And it was great to like work in collaboration with the community, so you understand the material that grows there, and side by side you're like, okay, you can use the same materials that you use for textiles in building construction as well. So, and then he also told me like a recipe for natural plaster, like the things that that are locally available that we can use, like coconut fiber, agave, etc., from or fibers from textile waste, which could be used for binding for plaster. Then natural oil, soap nut, stone dust, local clay, and lime. So the bricks could be also made locally. So this was a little view of the weaving unit, and in terms of their housing, again, enough space for them to live and to weave as well. And Shridhar's wife, for instance, she she does embroidery and tailoring, etc., and so does his mom. So ample space for that. And also like the spaces should be flexible in a way that in the day that his wife would use the space for tailoring, and in the night it could become a sleeping area. So coming back to the textile part of the intervention, the collection itself, as I said before, it does not have an identity like per se. It's the design and the construction has been borrowed from other clusters. So what we did with the weavers was to develop their own motif, a set of motifs that relates to their historic mythology. So here from the mythology and the language Telugu, we took the accents from the Telugu language and the story, and we came up with 7 motifs. So the story goes like they worship, and one of their main rituals is worship to Lord Markandaya, and he performs a fire sacrifice. So the first motif you see here is an amalgamation of the accents from the Telugu language, which represents fire. And a rishi is born then, who is commissioned to weave clothing for millions of gods and goddesses. And he builds a loom, and he uses lotus yarn from Lord Vishnu's navel. So the second motif here you see represents the rishi, because he has a power of 5 elements. So that's what it says. And the third one represents the loom, because he was inspired by his body parts to create the loom. So the top is the head, then the upper body and lower body. And then you have the lotus, which represents the lotus yarn that comes out of Lord Vishnu's navel. Then he gets married and gives birth to 101 children, 101 children. So the 5th motif you see is 2 in Telugu kind of merging together to become 1. And the 6th motif you see is 101, which represents the children that they have. Then they are all taken to Lord Vishnu to be blessed to continue this lineage of continuing weaving, basically. And each of them are given a lotus seed, and a cotton plant grows out of it, because as human evolution goes forward, you need more denser clothing. So the 7th motif basically represents that, a lotus seed and a cotton plant that grows out of it. And even in terms of the design and technique, or like the color and texture, it goes back, it relates to their mythological story. So white, for instance, is associated with lotus yarn, and conch shell white is associated with cotton. Yellow is associated with Lord Vishnu, indigo again, and red with the goddess that the rishi gets married to. So here, I mean, again, this just shows like the entire the chain that we, or the process that we followed while setting up the infrastructure and also the weaving. We sourced the yarn now this time from Tamil Nadu, and we used Azure-free dyes, which is an environmentally friendly dye, and warping, etc., was done also in Salem, because the weavers were like, okay, we don't have the infrastructure to support this, so we will. They knew they had some of their family and friends in Salem, so we got it from there, and then we set up the warp beam in Kodiala, and they started weaving. Here are some of the initial kind of iterations, and also the texture of the sari. If you see later, you will notice that there's a pattern which shows there's a transparent line, and then there's an opaque line. So it kind of, it alternates between transparency and basically we've played with the opacity. Again, it relates back to the opacity of lotus yarn. So lotus yarn is, or lotus fabric is quite diaphanous or transparent. So that's why cotton plant grows out, because we need more denser clothing as human evolution grows forward. So that's what the body of the sari represents. And here you see on the left, this is Mala, who's Shridhar's wife, who is our muse for this project. And we also had an urban muse who is Rukmini Vijay Kumar, who's a well-known dancer, Bharatanatyam dancer. So even in terms of communication, we kind of, the sari is quite versatile in terms of, it's not like it's woven in Kodyala and then it comes to Bangalore and it's woven by the urban folk. So we wanted to show how versatile the sari is. And here is Shridhar's niece, who is again another muse of ours. The different processes again involved. Shridhar, this is the bottom left, you see is the one in the glasses is Lakshman sir, who is our production head, and Govind Raju, and then there's Devraju on the right. And we, in terms of distribution system, we developed something called as a yarn coding system. So what happens normally, and this is again to connect weavers and wearers, basically normally what happens is, once you buy a sari, you don't know where it comes from, who's made it, and etc. So we wanted to build that connection basically between the weaver and wearer. And normally nowadays you get a QR code that will give you, the supply chain information, etc. But normally it gets lost, or there can be an RFID code that tracks the supply chain as well, but you can't wash the fabric with that. So what we chose to do was to weave the coding into the garment as a design element. So, the first one gives you, there's a weaver code, and it tells you about who's woven it. And then there's a pin code that's woven, and also the sari number. So on a loom, you can weave up to like 30 saris. So it gives you like a unique number, or it tells you which number your sari was on the loom. So you get a brochure when you buy the sari, which gives you information about all of this. And hopefully we digitize this soon to give further information to the wearers about the textile. So I just want to close by saying that this project for me personally was not about developing a solution, but it's a more like evolutionary and naturally like progressive project. And it was also not to bring back the past. It was not a revival project per se. It was more to do with contextually, a context, first of all, understanding the context and a need-based intervention, basically. And we used design as a tool to address these needs, and as also a tool to develop the interconnectedness, which was lost. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kshitija. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one second.
Thank you, Mom. It was really interesting. Now on to our next speaker, Shreya Lohia. Shreya has completed her bachelor's in architecture and worked in Norville at the studio, focusing on sustainable building practices for a year. Having a keen interest in crafts and textiles, she started a sustainable fashion label by the name Rajas in 2014, with a focus on handcrafted textiles and a zero waste policy. In 2020, she has joined hands with her husband and started a garment manufacturing unit that supplies bulk garments to corporate online buyers across India. She also runs a brand called Liktara alongside her mother, where the focus is on championing Indian heritage textiles like brocades and reviving old board games like Chapel. With varied interests in both personal and professional lives, she likes to be constantly challenged and learn new skills. Thank you, ma'am, for taking your time out to be here today. Over to you. Huh?
One second, I think there's some. Shreya, are you there? Shreya, we can't hear you.
Hello, hi. Am I audible now?
Yeah, Shreya, I think you're on 2 devices. So one of the devices you'll have to completely switch off the speaker for one of the devices, I think.
Hi, does this work?
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm not able to put on my video. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to stop it, but it's not allowing me to do so.
1 second, Shreya. I'll probably, let me just check.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, can you try now?
Of course. Hi.
Yes.
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. And lovely talk by Kshitija. Really appreciate all the information that we've been provided today. I would like to just request everybody to view another screen for my presentation. Due to some technical error, I am not able to do both on the same screen. Just let me know if this presentation is working. Shweta, is my presentation visible?
Yes. Can you go into full screen mode?
Of course. Can you guide me with how I can do this in a full screen mode? I'm so sorry.
Can you try
Technologically challenged.
Control L? Control L.
Control L, is it? Okay, all right. Did that work?
Yeah, works.
Perfect. So hi, everybody. I am Shreya, and a student of architecture from the year of 2009 and 2014 in RV. Would firstly like to thank all the faculty for sort of shaping who we've become today, especially Anuradha ma'am, who's right here. So let me just take you quickly through my journey, starting off with what was the first few, the building blocks of what I would say my architectural journey was. The first thing that architecture taught me was exploring. What I mean by exploring is I really started to use my hands to create things, to put down what I was thinking in my mind onto a physical and a tangible entity, like a piece of paper or probably models or even into words. We were encouraged to write articles. We were encouraged to paint. We were encouraged to use different medias to explore, 3D building works as well. Of course, sketching was one of the major parts of architecture, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I think I would really request everybody, all the students who are listening to this, to not think if they're sketching well or not sketching well, but please go ahead and sketch, because it really helps you develop a sort of personality when it comes to putting down anything on a piece of paper. Moving on, this is just a small example of the kind of explorations we did in college, wherein you guys must be doing sections and plans, but at some points we can break boundaries and try and create something a little out of the box, try and combine elements that haven't been combined before to create interesting ways of communicating your ideas, and also to come up with new forms of expressing yourself. moving on after architecture, the journey sort of led me to work at a studio in Auroville called Build Or back then, and that studio right now. So this really changed the entire way I sort of looked at architecture and life on a whole. Sustainability was always something that I thought about, but it became real when work experience came to it. In Auroville, I was exposed to different building techniques, whether it was rammed earth construction, Guna tube vault, Achikala brick construction. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's very important. The first few years, as soon as you finish your degree or your education per se, what you decide to do with those 2-3 years, it really molds your character as well as what you are going to do in your career. So I would really say that focus and find something that is of your interest. Don't look at something that will look great on your CV. Look at something that really excites you from within. Just put in some stuff that we did at the studio in Auroville that I worked in, explored a lot of things, cut up some columns to make a door, explored various techniques of building that I already mentioned. Guna tube vault was something really interesting that I came across that really helped understanding structures practically, till now it was all on paper. Did a couple of model explorations, did a whole lot of material study to understand the tangibility of the built around us. Next, I found myself in Gujarat, where we were working on a project called the Indira Awas Housing Yojana, which is basically housing for the rural poor. It is a government allocated fund that is provided to people under the poverty line to construct houses. Now, this really makes you question what it is that you actually want to do with your life. And over here, while exploring Gujarat, I came across this little village called Vanka. It is in Saurashtra. It is a weaving town. I realized that the entire center of my project sort of revolved around finding out more about Vanka and, drafting the loom, much like Kshitija has done in her presentation. It really interested me. And that sort of led me to thinking, what is it that I really want to do? Architecture really interested me. I took in every moment and every thing that I could find around me, grasped everything that I could, the culture, the community, everything really touched a chord inside me. But nothing did like textile did. That's when I sort of came across Khameer, which is a craft-based organization in Gujarat, which inspired me to start off my own. Okay, so this is about what I did with the basic knowledge that I did have. Rajas was a brand that I started out of passion for textile. I wanted to create. That's all I knew I wanted to do. And I wanted to use textile. There was no set goal. There was no aim. There was nothing that I was trying to achieve or, there were no targets. Picked up a few of my old grandma's sarees and literally started cutting it up, exploring what can be done with it. Had come across a cobbler in Auroville who had really inspired me in terms of I mean, every product he made was different. So I went back to him with all the fabrics that I found. We made a range of footwear that I launched in an event. One thing led to another. I started making tech accessories, laptop sleeves, etc., out of block printed fabrics, kalamkari fabrics, and anything handcrafted that I could get my hands on. At that point of time, it was just me making all the products on my own because I really wanted to use my hands. That is all I was trying to do. I was just trying to create, after which there was a long journey that sort of led me to then creating garments. Even something like this, it just happened. There was no plan of me moving into garments one day. As I said, I'm the kind of person who's taken one day at a time. Garments came very naturally, very organically, because I started making things for myself. When people started asking me where I have what I'm wearing, is when I realized that I would probably do okay when I start creating these garments for customers. And I just put up a few pieces for an event one day, and one thing led to another, and created a whole bunch of products after that, including a sub-brand called Dinesha, which used up all the small waste bits, trying to generate minimal waste, if not zero, and use the proceeds of this to sort of fund something again that my grandmother was running. She taught kids in Assam, I mean, these laborers, kids, and all of them. So wanted it to go full circle. Moving on, came across this hand dyeing technique called Itajime Shibori, which got me really excited, and I started exploring a lot in terms of different dyeing techniques. The image on the right, if you see, is just some fabric first dyed in a palak, an onion sort of a base, then in haldi, to figure out what it is that comes out of it. And going deeper and deeper, I understood the different techniques of Itajime. Itajime is a block resist technique. So if you see, going back to this image, the squares in the center image is created using the same clamps that are used for making of furniture. So the reason I mentioned this is that everything comes back a circle. The same clamps that I would see during my architecture days was now being used by me to create something with fabric. So that itself was really exciting. And another interesting thing that happened, if you can see the garments, I'm sure you can't tell by the way it's draped, but all 4 garments that you see in this image are literally rectangular bits of fabric, and it is fallen in a certain way because of the way it gets draped on a body. So something like this is completely inspired by architecture. I mean, all those classes, all those building construction classes were really making their way into something much more than I had imagined. And you sort of really understand how 2D becomes 3D differently on different objects. And when it is the human body, it does wonders. Moving on, after Raja's clothes, I really believe that nobody should ever become complacent. I wanted to grow further and understand what more can be done. And that's when Jamewar Apparels sort of happened to begin, over where we started manufacturing garments on a larger scale. So this was again something really new to me. I was used to creating 2 garments or 3 garments in one design. and then creating bulk. And even when it came to creating bulk, we were really conscious with the buyer that we were working with. So our predominant buyer is this brand called Tavi, which is an in-house Myntra brand, where they work with handcrafted elements being present in a garment. So this is something that is really making me understand how you can sort of scale up sustainability. And this exercise has really made me understand that there is no one way of doing something right. There is 500 things that you can do with your life tomorrow, as long as you don't plan it today. So I would really like to end on a note saying that, I mean, since you all are kids here, trying to figure out what you all might want to do after architecture, there is no right or wrong way of conducting your career. Just leave it up to the fact that you can be unplanned, and things sort of fall into place the moment you are passionate about a particular thing that you're doing. So yes, thank you so much, and over to you, Divya ji.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. That was just so refreshing. Yeah, it was really nice that you took us through your journey. I'll invite Namrata. Just give me 1 minute.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really inspiring. Our next speaker is Alana Cantaloupe. Alana began her design journey with a bachelor's in architecture from RV College of Architecture in 2010. By being a designer at heart, she wanted to explore other mediums beyond buildings and spaces. She went on to do an architecture internship in California, after which she worked on a residential interior project in Berkeley. After completing the project, she wanted to explore her long-term passion for working with textiles and fashion. Thereafter, she started her fashion design foundation with a year-long course at NIFT Hyderabad and another course in textile design at NIFT Bangalore. Equipped with the technical skills required, she started her custom clothing line in 2019 in Hyderabad and now successfully runs her own clothing label. Thank you, ma'am, for being here today. Now over to you.
Hey, hi everybody. I'm going to just take you through a more, like my conversation is going to be less formal. I just want to take you through my journey. I knew I just wanted to be in the design field before I chose architecture. And even at that point, it was always between working with in the fashion industry or architecture. Somehow my path led me to architecture and I ended up in RV College. Midway through my course, I kept getting drawn back into fashion design, but being halfway through, I somehow got through architecture. And at that point, I used to wonder why, if I'm wasting my time on something that I know I might not pursue. But now I know the value of it, and I know everything I've learned comes back to me in some way and is of some value. So after completing my bachelor's, I went on to do an internship in California, after which I was working on a residential interiors project. During that process of working on the interiors project, I had to go to a lot of textile stores to either source home furnishings or drapes and curtains, or even wall hangings. And it was at that point that I was paying more attention to textiles than ever before. And I realized how much value the Western world gives to our heritage crafts or our embroidery techniques. Then it made me wonder why our weavers back home or our artisans back home aren't getting the same kind of recognition, whereas the same thing is sold abroad for like $300 and $400 a yard. Then I came back to India, and I was always worried to take the plunge from architecture to fashion design because I invested 6 years of my life into this, and I was like, okay, what next? Then I did one architecture, like a construction project in Hyderabad. Then somehow after that, it felt like I got the validation I needed for all the studying and sleepless nights. But architecture is still somehow a part of our DNA, however hard I try to, I mean, even if I'm not following exact architecture right now. Then I was worried about making the plunge and thinking there'll be other fashion designers out there who probably have like their bachelor's and master's and are more well equipped than me. So I was worried about how I was going to survive. I started off with a foundation course in fashion design in NIFT Hyderabad, as Namrata mentioned. And that sort of taught me the technical skills I needed, whether it's pattern making or the draping. But one thing I noticed is compared to my other peers who came from other fields of, like, there were actually a bunch of engineers, there were lawyers, there were all sorts of people there. And somehow I found it quite easy to make the shift because most of the design basics are the same, and your design thinking that we've developed in these 5 years of architecture helps. If you think of the design process in architecture or in fashion, it's the same. You start with your mood boards, your client boards, your color palettes. So the entire process was quite seamless for me when I was trying to transition. But after doing that one course in fashion design, it didn't teach me, I mean, it didn't put me in touch with the textile heritage that I was talking about. So then I went on to do another course in NIFT Bangalore in textile design. And that's when we actually started visiting the handloom clusters and started interacting with weavers and artisans. At that point, I figured that I wanted to work with fabric. The one major difference I'd say is just the scale of working in architecture versus working in fashion design. You see faster results in fashion design, which was very exciting for me. The house that I mentioned that I did around 4 years ago is in the completion stages right now. Whereas in fashion, I've already made clothes for brides, and they're coming with their newborn babies now for clothes for them. So it's a different kind of rewarding, but nonetheless, architecture's been staying with me all along. I remember in my first year of college, I was a little confused whether I chose the right path. So I ended up going to a career counselor, and she gave me a bunch of exercises, asked me a bunch of questions, and at the end of it, she said architecture is the most suitable profession for you. But I really think it's only because overall architecture taught me how to visualize or work with material and a better understanding of, you know, like tactile surfaces and stuff. While I was doing my architecture, I always felt like I had a good eye for detail, and I used to like working with models and working with my hands mainly. So I used to think maybe I'll work in like a model making industry once I graduate. But then that's when fashion came right back to me. And now mostly what my focus is on is custom clothing. So with each client that comes to me, I go through the entire design process, starting from the mood board to I do the client profile and then the color palettes and then the material palettes. So it's quite similar, the entire process I go through with architecture of this. And another thing that definitely helped me is ergonomics are one thing that we kind of pay a lot of attention to in architecture just because of how you want a person to experience spaces. Similarly, it made me think about how a person can move in their clothes, or the kind of impact they'd make if it's a bride that's walking into a room on her wedding day, or a sangeet. And likewise, just being able to visualize my end product is something that comes really easy to me, only because of how many years I spent in architecture and working with your design process. As Shreya mentioned earlier about sketching, it's a great medium for us to be able to put our thought in front of another person. So my sketching skills definitely stayed with me. And a lot of basics that we were taught in architecture, be it our use of Photoshop or technology, it's probably something which should be taught even sooner in school, because like people use it on an everyday basis in a lot of, most design fields use it to some extent. There's a lot of fashion design is about your ability to draft different patterns and visualize your fabrics and how they'll fall, and how well they drape around a person. And to understand that kind of drafting, it's a lot of math and measurements, and it's a lot to do with our architecture drafting, for example, but it's just a different scale where you're trying to see how a space molds around its uses. It's similar in fashion design. So pattern making used to be probably one of my most favorite subjects in fashion design school. And thinking back, I think I really owe it to my architecture days. So one thing I can say is that nothing I've learned in architecture school goes to waste per se. It's all coming in handy at like every different stage of it. My end goal definitely is to tie back to architecture somehow, and probably explore home furnishings while giving our Indian heritage arts and crafts a better platform. Probably work with handloom clusters to give the traditional arts a more modern spin, but not really taking away from what their basics are, but just different uses, maybe like what Shreya is doing, where the younger generation has a better appreciation for our heritage crafts. So one more thing I'd like to say for the students doing architecture right now. After architecture, most other design fields come quite easy, because I think architecture is one field where understanding spaces, we're understanding humans, we're understanding materials. We work with so many different aspects of design that all your struggles are worth it. Don't be disheartened. It's a great foundation. Even in my graduating batch of probably 75 or 80, I'd say maybe only 1/4 of them have actually stuck to direct architecture. Everybody is branched out and everybody is doing really well. So yeah, architecture is a perfect foundation for all other fields of design. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you so much. Amrita, you want to take over?
Yes, ma'am. That was really inspiring. And now I'd like to invite our professor, Dr. Salila Vanka, to share a few words with us, post which we'll have the Q&A session.
Just give me 1 second. I'll have to unmute him.
Okay, I'm not able to, okay, yeah, you can see me and hear me now, I guess. So sorry for all those interruptions. And a big thanks to all our speakers. I think they were also amazing in their own ways. And so I think when we put this event together, we knew something like this would happen, and we exceeded our expectations. So thanks a lot to all the speakers, and I'm looking forward to the discussion after this. And I think I'll cede the ground to the stage to Divya, who can do a much better job of putting the talks together. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Kshitija and Alanka, for your really different journeys and encouraging the new generation to try out things. That was something that I was really happy to hear, because I feel all of us have gone through this journey. And the fact that all three of you have been super fearless about trying new things, that is something that I would also like to encourage the new batches to try. Just a minute. And what Shreya was talking about, how you should, the first 2 years, I would say actually the first 5 years after you finish your architecture degree is all about exploration and trying different things, because just because you studied something does not mean that is your last resort. You should definitely try and explore new avenues. The other thing that I could hear from all three journeys has been mainly the fact that the three of them were extremely brave and not too worried about failure, because every journey you might fail in one thing, but you might succeed in something that you completely did not expect. So that is something I would like to pass on to all the new batches coming out as well. So thank you so much, the three of you. So one thing that stuck with me with what Shreya was talking about was how to take one day at a time. And I just would like to ask Shreya a little bit more about how to switch off your internal questioning of whether, the switch that you did from architecture to textiles was easy. Like, what was your thought process? How difficult was it to actually let go of something and take over something else, which might have been a new journey? Because compared to Alanka or even Kshitija, I think technically for you it was a new exploratory process. So maybe you want to talk about that. Hello. Hello. Hi, Shreya.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi. So the shift from architecture to textile, I would say, is definitely, I mean, it is scary. Trying to do something that you haven't got the slightest idea about is scary. But I would say use all your resources. I would say that you're really passionate about something if you don't wait for somebody to teach it to you. And I mean, I think I owe it all to like YouTube and these various educational tools that have come out to help us, including an aunt who taught me how to make patterns on newspaper without, knowing the basics of it. The entire dyeing process that I'm talking about, Ita Jime Shibori, I have only learned it through YouTube. So if you are able to teach yourself a craft, whatever it may be, it may be sketching, it may be pottery. If you are teaching it to yourself, you're really passionate. And I know it sounds cliche, but I feel like success runs behind you if you run behind your passion. So yeah, I mean, it's not about being brave, it's just about letting your calling find you. That I truly believe in letting your calling find you.
Thank you so much, Shreya. This was so refreshing. Thank you so much. I wish you all the luck. If anyone in the audience or everyone watching this, if they have any questions for any of our speakers, could you please share your questions on the chat so I could definitely read it out to them? So as I wait for people to ask you questions, I'm going to go on to the next one. So Kshitija, if I could ask you, from everyone that we heard so far, we would like to know a little bit more about your journey and how you went from maybe from architecture to textile, and when did you realize that you would like to explore the idea of textiles much more than you were doing with space? Is that something you would like to share?
So for me, I don't see architecture and textiles as separate. So for me, it was largely about the system. So even like in my training, so whether it was my first master's in regeneration and development, or my MA in design, or even MRG, it was about understanding the system and the needs. So I didn't really choose to work in textiles per se, but it's more to understand the systems a bit better. And Registry of Sarees was already kind of doing that. And I feel like textiles is just a medium for me to understand the system better and to find the disconnections and how the training that I have gotten and skills that I've developed as an architect, how can I put that into bridging these gaps per se. Yeah.
That was really nice of you to hear from you. But actually, I think maybe I should frame my question better. Like, all of us go through our journey where our basic foundation in architecture, we have a lot of things that we learn in the first 5 years. But what I can see with you is more nuanced and more in-depth analysis and more like more specialization of sorts. So maybe that's the question I would like to ask, so that the students listening to us might just find a path or maybe try to explore it.
Yeah, so I worked, so after my bachelor degree, I worked with CNT. That's where I met you as well.
Yeah.
And after that, like when I was working at CNT, for me, it was, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to, kind of understand architecture on different scales per se. So then I did a small internship, like a 3 or 4 month internship with Benny Kuriakose in Chennai. And he works with local materials, with local community. And the experience I got with him was like, from start to, I mean, I didn't see the completion of the project, but the way he works is like kind of hands-on with the local community. And that I really, I was like, kind of very, what do you say, it interested me a lot. And he actually guided me to do this course in Oxford in regeneration and development, which again dealt with architecture on different scales. It was not just about regeneration on a building scale, but also understanding from a building to like the impact that it makes on an urban scale as well. So it was a very kind of a broad experience that I got from my work experience and also the education part of it, which really helped me. Again, working in Bath as well. I worked there for almost 2 years, and then I realized that it was a bit of a corporate scene for me. I wanted to come back and explore the local community, come back to my roots per se, and see what I can do here. So 2017, again, I took a break, and then I came back and worked with local communities here in India and developed little, projects, kind of speculative projects. I think that's a good way of learning as well. You develop your own projects. So based on your interests, first you jot down your interests and ask like why, first figure out your why, I think. And then from there, like, branch out and see what all you can do to feed into that why. Yeah.
So one other thing that caught my attention while I was listening to you present is how you explained and explored the idea of identity. Because if you go back to your weaving community that you were talking about, the Kodiara weaving community that you were talking about, what really stuck with me is how most of these weaving communities have which you can identify the fabric that comes out of these weaving communities, because they have like a handmade and skill set that comes out of these communities. That is something that even us in our practice right now, when we try to think about what Indian identity means, is actually very difficult to put your hands on it. Maybe I feel, in my personal opinion, I've seen Sri Lanka do it much better than India could do it. So I feel the fact that you explore so much about their identity, does that give you much more in like analysis, or much more idea of how they think and why they make the patterns that they make? Is it just something that is like transferred from your ancestors down, or is it something that's that evolved in the process of transferring it from somebody who knows it to the next person in the generation? Or like, what do you see when it comes to identity and pattern, say in the weaving communities? And is that something we could also look at in terms of architecture and our heritage of building, or heritage of like material, all of that? So,
Okay, that's a very
long, sorry.
So yeah, I think it is, I mean, it's a kind of a debatable thing, identity nowadays, isn't it? Like, if you actually go back, what is truly Indian or what is truly Sri Lankan, one can write of many dissertations about it. But over here, in this context, it was important because, they wanted this to be viable. And upon discussion, again, it's a context-based intervention. So say if I went to a cluster that's close by, we probably wouldn't do the same intervention. It would probably be something else. So here with the weaving community, they were like, we don't feel like we've come from Andhra. We are highly skilled cotton weavers, and we've lost it, And in terms of the motif, like if you go to Kanchivaram, you see the, the motifs that come out of there, the material and the skill that comes out of there. Whereas here we don't feel like we're a part, we're not connected through that identity. So, and what ties, and a lot of these weaving communities migrate from one place to another, and what actually ties them together are these rituals and the social connections that they have. And so we were like, okay, what if we, it would be from this identity, why can't we bring those ritualistic and the social kind of things into the design part of the textile? So that was a starting point, and it kind of led on from there.
Thank you so much, Kshitija. This was eye-opening for us. So if I could direct my next question to Alanka. So if I could ask you, I know you have 2 degrees in fashion. So if you could just walk us through your thought process on why you thought you wanted to be equipped with a degree as opposed to getting into the field and getting your hands wet. Like, what made you choose the path of doing another degree to equip yourself a little bit more, or what was your thought process? Because I feel like everyone could learn and hear from your experience as well.
So I actually wanted to do a master's in fashion, but while looking at my application procedures and looking at what our basic skills would be to make the most of a master's, I realized that what I was looking for is not to learn about how to design, but rather the technical skills needed to work with fabrics. In the fashion design course, for example, I learned how to work with patterns or manipulate patterns. And I used to work with tailors and try to make my own garments earlier. But I didn't feel like I was at the top of my game when I was trying to explain to them. I didn't know the technical skills or the terms that go in the industry. And then moving on to textile design, the reason I went into that mainly was to not just be able to make garments out of ready fabric. I wanted to explore how I can make specialized textiles, whether it's for home furnishings or apparel. So then when I went back into textile design, I could learn how all the processes or the warp and weft is and all these technical terminologies. Now that I know all of those, I feel like I have a much better and a holistic approach to my design versus just being a superficial designer who just draws a quick sketch and expects it to translate. And also
great.
to add to the question you were asking, Kshitija, earlier, like I said, eventually I do want to work with craft clusters. So I do visit quite a few clusters. And now that I know how the textile is woven or how each of the yarns are made, when I go to a textile cluster, I can actually talk to them and see how much they're ready to adapt, because all of there are few clusters that seem like they're ready to evolve into when I say modern, I'm not saying we take away from their traditional motifs, but little things like maybe modifications, color. There's some textile clusters that use very bright and loud colors, and I do see a market for a lot more pastels and a different kind of let it be saris or kanchivaram, colors that never used to exist in the earlier days are more in use now. The only reason I'm able to have those conversations or see the potential the textile clusters have is because of the technical skills I developed over these few courses.
Right. So if I could ask three of you, not anyone in particular, but do you feel like your education in architecture has made you slightly more in tune with the person? Because even when you're designing a space or designing a garment, you're thinking of the person who's wearing it. Like when it comes to space, you're thinking of the person using the space. So do you feel that's something that comes intuitively to you because of your education in architecture? So maybe that, because that might not be something a person whose background in engineering would feel, too, because even though they are building a car for a human being, but I feel like with architects and with designers, it comes much more naturally. Is that something that, like, I just like to hear from you when you tried a different path, like, is that something that happened or is that helpful?
Okay,
So
I'm
maybe
the
Alana, you can take
unmuted,
it.
so I'll go first. Yeah, definitely. To an outsider, while doing our architecture, we've heard quite a few times that we're the ones who make building drawings, right? And as an architecture student, it used to infuriate me all along because there's so much more to what we do in architecture. We're understanding spaces and we're understanding the human psyche. We're trying to figure out what each client wants to enrich their life, whether it be a home or a commercial space. So even when it comes to fashion design, I feel like we could just be making pretty looking outfits that aren't the most comfortable to wear or that aren't made for a particular type of person. So in that sense, architecture definitely makes you think beyond what what an outsider can see. So in that aspect, yeah, I'd say architecture did train me to understand my client better.
So in my final question, I think this I would ask Shreya and Anuradha because I know Kshitija's answer. So I'm going to ask you guys. So do you guys ever miss doing just space, or is that something you still would like to do? Or have you ever thought of going back? Not about going back, but trying it out again. That might be better.
Alana, do you want to get that first?
Sure. Probably not. I really like the scale I'm working at right now and the craft I'm doing right now. I like working with these details and I like working with textiles. So the only way I want to tie back to my architecture would be to go back into interiors and home furnishings, where it will be a little bit of my textiles and a little bit of architecture as well.
Right. Nice to hear.
Okay. Yeah, I think yeah, I'm speaking to architecture students. I shouldn't say this, but no, I don't miss architecture at all. It is about how do I say this? It is about giving life to something that was non-living, whether it was a brick forming a space or yarns forming a fabric, forming a garment at the end of it. And that process of forming a garment, clothing a human being, gives me utmost happiness.
Nice to hear. I'm so happy to hear your journey. Best of luck. So I'd like to start talking about the questions that have been asked. So this is to all three of you. So Salila ma'am says, from all three talks, it was very evident that your work enables you to encourage and to engage and empower local communities in the process and production of textiles. Do you see similar potential for architects to take a social role in architecture? Anyone could take this one.
I think it's much needed, isn't it? The kind of holistic understanding of anything that we do. I think that's needed, whether it's social, economic, environment. I think an understanding on of every aspect is needed now. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, it pretty much did.
Architecture is still somehow going to be a part of our DNA, whether we like it or not. So when I go around a city, I still do my appreciating, criticizing buildings or structures that I see. And you see all these like giant glass boxes, which are certainly not made for our climate. And then there are a few people like, I remember Chitra Vishwanath ma'am was my mentor and mentor for my thesis. And I was so inspired by how she used to work with traditional building or construction techniques, and it seems like our traditional techniques are very hard to come by now because everybody is doing the modern, brick and cement construction. So even if you want to do like your red oxide flooring or your hand painted Atmanguri tiles, now slowly people are appreciating it. But somehow there seems to be a very small number of those. So as architects, I'm sure you can bring back our age-old techniques. That there is something to all our age-old techniques. We may not appreciate it, maybe it's slower, but definitely.
Thank you, guys. The next question is to Kshitija. Was there any, from Namrata, was there any instance where you departed from the traditional methods while working with the local communities, and what was the impact of it?
I think their skills are so advanced, and so for me it's been a learning experience. So any local community I work with, there's so much to learn from them. So there's no way that I would depart from their traditional techniques and skills. But like this project, so if say we have to have a new intervention, I would say that it has to be in sync with the old. So even in architecture refurbishment projects, for instance, when I used to work in England, so it's almost like seamless, the old and the new kind of fit right in. So even if we were to introduce something new, I think we have to be mindful, and it comes back to caring and the dignity aspect of which is whole another topic, maybe for another day.
So the next question is to all three of you. Anyone can take it. I'm sure this question is going through almost everyone's mind who's watching the talk. So this is from Nayana to everyone. Would it be difficult to come back to the practice of architecture traditionally in terms of construction after delving into a newer field of design like textile, etc.? Maybe actually, Kshitija, maybe you can talk about it, and then Shreya, and then Alana, because I think you're not completely out of
So at the Registry of Sarees, we do exhibitions and books as well. And for me, even making a book or designing a book is architecture. So I don't think I'll ever feel like or even like textile design. So I don't see, as I said before, architecture is different from the things that I'm doing now. Yeah.
So do you think it will be difficult for you to, like, that's what I feel. So would it be difficult for you to go back to a traditional practice? Like, I think that's what they're trying to. Do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
it's not impossible.
It's not impossible, but I also feel like if the design firms, what I'm observing now in Bangalore, at least, like we need to branch out and not just stick to kind of the just only architecture. I feel like the more we branch out and kind of focus on like research-led design, it'll be a lot more helpful for the firm and kind of the city and the community at large as well. Yeah.
Right. Shreya, what do you feel about this question? So they were asking that would it be difficult to go back to a traditional construction or architecture practice after trying a different field? Maybe you could also answer this.
Definitely not. I don't think so. It is you never forget what you learn.
Right.
It is always there in the back of your mind. So the tools that we have been equipped with during the course, during the work experience that we've had, will always remain. Yes, it might take a little longer for a person going back to it after a couple of years rather than somebody who's been practicing it. But I feel like design, whether architectural, whether textile, fashion, graphic, is intuitive. Um, it exists in you somewhere, and with practice, it's just that it flows that much more naturally. So time is the only constraint. Otherwise, it is not difficult to get back to any practice. So explore whatever and come back to it if you don't find your calling, is what I would say.
Alanka, thank you so much. Alanka, would you like to also answer?
I would say yes and no, because your design thinking has been, you've been taught how to design or understand spaces in college, and all of that stays with you throughout. Just because we're working with a different medium, all of that's not going to go out of the window. But then again, going back to traditional construction, we probably won't be at the top of our game in terms of the latest technology or materials. So we will have a lot of catching up to do. So it's not impossible, but it won't be the easiest to go right back to it, I guess.
That's a very honest and intelligent answer as well, because you don't want to mislead anyone into anything. So, Naina, I hope this also answered your question.
Yes, I'm guessing it did, because I'll have to unmute her, but I'll just see if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 second.
Anyone else have any more questions?
Okay. Yeah, Naina has replied, I think, on the chat.
Yeah. So before we conclude, like I would ask all three of them maybe to just give one line of advice to everyone watching. So it would definitely be helpful. Maybe Kshitija, you could start.
Don't stop trying. Success, for me now, I'm still, kind of learning to define what success means to me. But for me, it's about, it's kind of working. It's about being happy, ultimately doing what you're doing, to put it simply, whether it's with the people you work, giving back to the community, learning from the community, whatever it is, just put your heart and soul into it, and you can only do that, and you can only find that space by trying, I feel. And once you're in that space, it's just it opens out a whole new world.
Thank you, Kshitija. Shreya, would you like to? No?
Sure. I would, the one advice that I would give to everybody is explore with mediums as much as you can, since we are in the design field. I remember my first exploration with textile was when I was probably 4 years old, trying to sew garments for Barbie dolls because they were so expensive and obviously my parents wouldn't invest in it. But something like that really stays on. And since you all are in the prime of your learning point, this 18 to 23 is, I feel, when you can absorb like a sponge when it comes to design. Please explore every medium possible and yeah, take it all in.
Thank you so much, Shreya. Alanka, would you like to now?
I'd like to say, if you're doing your architecture and you feel like you're not the best at it, don't be disheartened. You're still learning a lot, and it's going to come in handy whether you know it now or not. And explore, like the other speakers said, just explore till you find your thing. You're still young, you have all the time in the world to do it. You will find your calling. I definitely wasn't one of the best students in my architecture days, but that didn't stop me from exploring design till I found what I really want to do. So yeah, stick at it. You'll find your calling soon.
Thank you so much, three of you.
Sorry to cut you off, Divya. Just
Yeah.
she said, don't be disheartened. Richard Rogers, one of my favorite architects, just passed away, and I was watching his talk earlier this afternoon, and it's called, I think, Autobiography of Richard Rogers, and there he talks about failures in architecture and all of the failures he's had so far. You should. I think I would highly recommend all of you go check out that the talk. It's very inspiring.
Thank you so much, Kshitija.
Paste the link here for you.
Yeah, you can paste in the messages. So I think Shweta, I think we're done. If anyone else would like to take over, Namrata. I would just like to say one last thing. Thank you, Anuradha ma'am, for remembering all of us and putting us together. I think we stand easily. I don't remember. I think it's almost been like 12 years since I met you. So it's great, and we really appreciate you getting us together. And thank you, girls, for putting it together. So if anybody else would like to take over, it'd be great. It'd be a good time to do that.
My thanks to all of you as well. The fact that you have all come back and spoken about it makes me feel very nice. Thank you. It was fun listening to all of you. Yeah, fun listening to all of you. Shreya, you reminded me of all my tailoring days of stitching my own clothes. All the conversations that you spoke about. I used to make a lot of bags. I made my children's clothes, pants and shirts. And I used to have fun. After they started crawling and walking, my sewing days got cut put. I could not get onto the machine again.
I think it's time you get back to it, ma'am. It's a lot of fun.
I think I should. Enjoyed it. Thank you, all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kshitija, I enjoyed the fact that you were talking about looking at the weaver's perspective of how they wanted to live and therefore designing a space for them. That is something which is very architectural in that sense. So I enjoyed that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to all the speakers for this really informative session. And now I'd like to call up Professor Salila Vanka to conclude and share a few words.
Okay, thank you, Shweta, for unmuting me. Anyway, I'd like to thank all our speakers again and Divya for coordinating this very lovely session today. Just a few points that stuck with me. First of all, I was very touched that all of you remembered your teachers so fondly, and that's always lovely. So we hope you come and visit us sometime and see Anuradha in person and meet all of us as well. And the other points I just wanted to quickly, that stuck with me through your talks was the idea, that's what my question was getting at too, just seeing a bigger role for yourself, whichever realm of design you are in, whether you're an architect or a textile designer or a weaver or any creative field for that matter, the engagement with communities, and how you learn from them, and it's a very respectful relationship. It's not condescending, or it's not about just giving to a community, but it's like you're learning as well, right? So I think that conversation, the productive, creative discussions that happen between us and the weavers communities and other communities that you're also learning so much from, I think that came through very nicely in all your talks, and that's something we should, as architects, also be mindful of, because our buildings wouldn't stand but for the masons and the other craftspeople that actually make it happen, right? So I think that's something that's very, very nice to hear. And the other thing was about how you spun architecture into your talks about what you learned in college, and you brought that in very nicely. And thank you for that, because for us, it's always challenging as teachers and as students also, to see connections between things. And now that you've stepped out into the field and you're exploring design in your own ways, I think you understand, you start seeing those connections better, right? So it comes in retrospect a lot of times, but it's nice that you actually talked about that. And I think the other point that came through was also about not copying. When you talked about revivalism, I think Kshitija talked about it, and the other speakers. It's not about just reviving what was. It's not possible to, and that's something we think about in architecture as well, right? For instance, in our studio, we're talking about critical regionalism right now. And it's not about just copying what was. As I said again, it's not possible. And with all the possibilities with the new materials, new technologies, etc., going back to the past is not a possibility, and perhaps not desirable as well. But then how you reinvent and recreate, and also envision things, I guess that's what is important, and that's what's beautiful about design, whichever field you are practicing it in. So I think these 3 points came across very nicely in your talks, and so thanks again. And Divya, thank you so much for moderating the session so nicely. And that's about it. Thanks, and have a lovely evening. And thanks, Namrata, of course, and Shweta for coordinating the whole event.
Thank you so much, Shreya, Kshitija, Aalana, and of course, Divya. It was just amazing to have this session today. I think it was something completely different, at least in the last couple of talks. This has been really, really engaging, for the fact that it's so personal. So thank you so much once again.
I was drawing a lot of relationship between conservation and heritage that I end up having with students when I was listening to all of you, because they feel that conservation and heritage is a little copy and they have to copy it as is. Well, I keep telling them that if you copy it as is, maybe the building will not live a long life, because it doesn't have the old-fashioned perspective, purpose, if I can put it that way. So if I can reinvent the purpose, the building will continue to survive. The techniques will continue to survive, which is what most of you are doing actually, especially the Chibori thing, and your Kshitija, your conversation about putting the looms in place and the lighting in place. I kind of enjoyed the fact that you were talking about the roofing material. I hope you can succeed and get it up and running, which will be wonderful. If we can make it work, it'd be wonderful. I really hope you can talk to them.